Hello and welcome to our channel. Our names are Mike and Heather, and we've been traveling in our 2013 Ford Transit Connect, and we just finished all 50 states, 49 of them in this van, and we're here to talk about all things safety, because that has to be one of the most asked questions in our comment section is, do you feel safe? How do you find your parking spots? What are you doing? We're here to answer it all.
We have stayed out of our van that we call Appa for months at a time, and we stayed anywhere from parking lots to boondocking, dispersed camping sites, regular campsites that you would pay to stay in, and just about everywhere in between.
So to start off with, we'll just talk about the different spots in general that you can stay before we dive into the safety. There's three main categories, as we like to call them. The first being a good old plain campsite that you pay for. So you make a reservation, you pay money, and you stay in that lot. The second is called dispersed camping or boondocking, which essentially means the same thing. You pull up on a designated camping area, but it's free. Those are found on BLM land, which is Bureau of Land Management land, and in national forest, so public land that you can park for free. And then the third, and probably more popular, especially on the East Coast, is kind of stealth camping that you do on the sides of roads or in parking lots of businesses and stores. That's kind of the main three ones that we have found ourselves in at one point or the other on our travels.
To start, we'll talk about how we find camping spots or boondocking spots to stay overnight in while we're living out of our van, and that's on an app called iOverlander. It is a free app that uses user-generated GPS locations to find different places that are good to camp. It's really great because it has reviews as well as information about the type of location you're staying. So there are different icons for paid campsites, for dispersed campsites, as well as businesses that have overnight parking, in addition to water, laundry, showers, anything that you could want on there for van life, it's there. It is definitely the app that we use the most when we were on the road. It was something that we pulled up every night as we were getting ready to find a place to stay, and it was invaluable for a number of reasons. The biggest is that it has user reviews, which were super helpful in gauging whether or not a spot was likely going to be for us or not.
Sometimes you would read through the reviews of like, oh, I got the knock, meaning that it's not safe to stay there in the sense that it's illegal to stay there and cops will come and move you along. And then there's other reviews that may be, oh, hey, I was woken up by a bunch of hooligans in the area who are banging on my van, wouldn't recommend staying here. And then there's even some that are like, oh, a tad bit noisy, it's by a train, wouldn't recommend. So not that that's like necessarily a safety issue, but you get a feel for the campsite before you go there and if it's going to be a good fit for you for the night.
We fortunately have never gotten the knock, and we've never had any issues in any of the campsites that we've been staying at, whether they're campsites or parking lots across the country. And I think a big part of that is because we prioritize just a safety mindset when we're looking for places to stay. So we have a few things that we do as we're getting ready to call it a night, and we begin looking at iOverlander for locations to stay.
Each of the three categories of places to stay, so campsites, dispersed camping / boondocking, and parking lot / stealth camping, we've come up with a set of safety rules for each of them and things that we just found ourselves doing for peace of mind. At campsites specifically, you don't really have a lot to worry about. Maybe you get like the rowdy people a couple spots down who are
noisy more than actual.
Yeah, maybe they're like having a 4th of July party and a little bit loud. But for the most part, if you pay for a campsite, there tends to be some type of security, so like a ranger will come around. There might even be like a gate that you have to have like a code to get into. I know that the shower situations, a lot of times you do have to have a code, or to use the bathrooms you have to be a member of that campsite for the night. So for the most part, they really are safe. Some of the things that we do is back into the campsite. Because it is in an open area, most times you can still back up if somebody were to like block you in or like drive off to the side on the grass. But for the most part, paid campsites, we feel pretty safe without doing some of these other things that we do when we stealth camp or dispersed camp.
Yeah, it's definitely the spot that we feel the most comfortable and feel the most secure when we're in a paid campsite, because everyone is there for a reason.
At dispersed camping spots, it's a little bit different. That's where we really read the reviews through the location before we go to, one, keep our van safe, to make sure it's even a road or an area that we can go into our van, because we don't have 4-wheel drive and we kind of have like a low clearance on our vans. We want to make sure we can get there. So if it says, oh, I've got up here in my car, or I got up here in my little minivan, like most vehicles can go up there, we already know it's going to be safe for our van. But if there's reviews like, oh, it's super muddy, or like, oh, it's really washed out, like wouldn't recommend recommend after it's been raining, it could be kind of dangerous. We just avoid those areas altogether. And then as far as staying safe as we sleep, we do have a couple things that we make sure that we do every single night.
When we look at dispersed campsites, that's an area that we always try to get to before it gets dark. We want to be able to go in, scope it out, make sure that the area looks okay, and get a sense of where everything is before we make camp for the night. Additionally, this is an area where we like to have a little bit more privacy. We don't mind neighbors, but you want to have your own space because anyone can be there for any reason. Not to be distrustful or to say anyone is out there doing bad stuff, but just for our own security, we like to have our own space, not too close to other people.
When we do see other vans in a boondocking area, it does give us a sense of security of safety in numbers.
And that we are allowed to be there.
Yeah, but like we just don't want to park right up on somebody. We, go down the road a little bit more.
Especially in smaller spaces, if someone is in a space, rather than crowd the area, we'll just move on. That's probably one of the biggest things is don't be afraid to move on from these areas. Even if it was your plan to stay there, the reviews looked good. If you got there and you didn't like how things look, definitely just trust your gut and keep moving. We've done that in the middle of the day at spots. We've done that at the end of the day when we just wanted to sleep, and we've driven extra 30-40 minutes to find somewhere that we really did feel safe to sleep. So always prioritize safety.
Another thing that we do safety-wise when we are going to some boondocking locations or dispersed camping that may not be in a very populated area is we always have location sharing on. We do this throughout the day so that way any one of our family members can find where we're at in the map, but especially at night, we make sure that it's always on in case something happens, somebody knows where we're at. That being said, always have your cell phone charged, always have Google Maps downloaded of an area that you're going to be in, because sometimes, especially when you do start going out in the middle of nowhere, you might not have GPS to find your way back. Make sure that you have where you're going, you download the map, so that way if you start losing service, you know your bearings still.
That brings us to the last type of camping spot that we end up in, and that's parking lots. I will say that probably is where we stayed the majority of the time. While we would love to always be in a beautiful campsite or find some really great dispersed camping location with a view of the ocean, it's not always possible, but there tends to always be a Walmart or a Cracker Barrel or somewhere that you can park up overnight. The locations that we've had the best success and feel the most comfortable staying overnight in are Walmart, Cracker Barrel, which is our personal favorite, Home Depot and Lowe's, and Cabela's and Bass Pro Shops kind of all have an allowance for overnight parking for the most part.
For the most part being key. Sometimes you will get the dreaded no overnight parking sign. They tend to be in more affluent areas, so you can kind of predict if you're going to be allowed to stay there or not before you go.
A lot of times restrictions on overnight parking come from local ordinances. That's not up to the store. Even if the store says it's okay, if the sign is there and it's a local ordinance, there's a good chance that you're going to get the knock at 2 in the morning that says you have to keep going.
You have other options if that does happen. Most highways have truck stops, which we've never felt unsafe at a truck stop. That's what they're designed to do, is be a rest stop for semi-truck drivers and people who are traveling on the road. So there's usually not a rest stop too far. The only problem with those is that there's a lot of people coming and going, and it's a little bit noisier than just a parking lot after the business is closed to be able to sleep in. So it's not the worst option, it's just a little bit noisy of an option with more foot traffic.
Walmart's probably the business that allows overnight parking that you'll find the most. Most towns will have a Walmart. Cracker Barrel and the truck stops are maybe more preferable, but they're usually along highways, so they're not always going to be around, and you may have to drive a little bit to go find one of those.
Cracker Barrel's really nice because they have designated RV slots. They want to encourage people to spend the night or at least come visit and then eat there the next morning. So there are designated camping and RV slots, which are really nice and just make you feel like, oh, you don't have to be as hidden.
Moving on into what we look for in a parking lot, generally if it's a Walmart or a Cracker Barrel, we like the business to be on its own. Ideally, that means you're not going to be having foot traffic, and the people who are there have driven there and have a reason for being there. You're not just getting people walking through in the middle of the night because...
If it's like a strip mall or a plaza that has lots of different businesses.
Yep, so that's our first kind of thing that we look for when we get into an area. The next one is we always look to scan and see if there are other vehicles. It's not something that has to happen, and we've stayed in parking lots where we're the only vehicle, but it's nice to know that there are other people using the spot, and more likely that it's okay if there are other people there.
Usually there's overnight workers as well, so you can kind of still blend in with like the cars in the parking lot. But yeah, it's always reassuring when you see another van life or RV get rigged up in the parking lot as well.
Another way that we sort of avoid attention and avoid getting the knock is we try and be respectful of the business. If it's possible, always go in and check to make sure it's okay to overnight park. Companies and businesses really appreciate that, and sometimes they'll tell you their preferred area for you to park up overnight. We try and avoid any of the more popular spots, nothing close to the entrance. We try and stay a little bit away from those areas, and definitely always underneath a lamppost. It's maybe not the most ideal for sleeping, but it's great because it allows your area to be lit up. If you need to get out of the van for any reason, that's something that
there's usually also a camera on the lamppost as well.
Anytime we're in a parking lot, and really anytime we're getting set to sleep overnight, we always back in and make sure that we leave the driver's seat completely clear. You want to make sure that if you do have an emergency situation or there is something going on that you need to get out of there quickly, you want to be able to get to your front seat, start the car, and just drive.
We also put the keys in the same spot every time, every night before we go to bed, so that way it's not any franticness of if you do need to leave quickly of like, oh my gosh, where did we put the keys? We need to go. It's always on the same hook, and it's always within an arm's reach to be able to take and go.
The more you can blend in, the less likely you are to have anyone come up and have an issue with you. So we always try and be as inconspicuous as possible when we're in a parking lot camping overnight.
Once you park up, you might get out to go to the bathroom, but once you're parked in your van, you're not opening all the doors and letting people know that you're a camper van, or opening the back doors to cook and people can look in and see that you have a nice camera, or are just like sleeping in the back there and not just like a commuter car. You don't want to draw any attention to yourselves when you're in those areas.
With parking lots, we treat those a little bit differently than boondocking sites, whereas with a dispersed camping location, we would want to get there during the day, make sure that we can see everything in the light and have a good idea of what we're getting into. We try not to get to our stealth camping spots too early in the day, because then you're just very obviously sitting there for a long time. So whether it's a truck stop or a Walmart type business, we try to get there around dusk as it's turning into evening so that we can still scope the business out. We have enough time to drive further down the road if we need to, but we're there towards the end of the evening, and if we start getting ready for bed, it's not too long before we're at that point where we can go to sleep and try and leave early the next morning. And also in the same vein of being inconspicuous, we did switch our reflectix from having the really silvery side be out to having a black side. We have gone from using the shiny side to using the blacked out side. We have found that it's a lot less conspicuous of, oh, we have window coverings up, there's something in here. When you just pass by and we have our black window coverings up, it just looks like tinted,
or like dark. You can't really, the reflectix is just very obvious and shiny.
So just things like that we've done to continue to minimize our visibility and just remain inconspicuous when we're stealth camping.
And then more of like the self-defense type things, which again, we've never used these, not even for its original purpose. So what I mean by that is that we have bear spray. We actually had 3 cans of bear spray in here at one point in time.
Never sprayed our bear spray.
Not for bears or any other type
self-defense type thing.
But we had one at each of the doors. So we had one up front, we had one back here, still here. So that way, if for whatever reason somebody broke in, they're easily grabbable to be able to use. We also have camping knives. I'm not sure what we would actually ever do with that, but we have like some type of weapon-y things.
Yeah.
More for peace of mind
than actual any need for self-defense with them.
Yeah, we also have like a big flashlight, which we've seen a lot of other people recommend because that's probably your best self-defense weapon, because then you flash it and you can also use it
as a club.
Yeah, but basically if you flash it, you can stun and probably run away without having to use any of the other things that I just described. So we have some things within hand's reach when we're sleeping just to make ourselves feel better. But truthfully, we've never felt unsafe at any of the sleeping locations that we've ever been in visiting 49 states out of our van.
Yeah, absolutely. And additionally, we have a safe that keeps all of our valuable electronics when we're in the van and when we're not in the van. They just go there. That's their storage location. So they're always in a good spot. If we get out of the van, we pull our curtains so that you can't see into the back, and we try not to leave anything valuable in the front seat cab where you could see it. So everything just moves back when we go on hikes or get out to walk around a town or a city. We maybe going overboard, but it's resulted in us never having an issue. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Is that the right saying?
I've never heard that before.
So there's really no secret to how to stay safe in van life.
Mostly common sense.
Yeah, I think common sense is the biggest thing. I remember when we first started, we were very nervous to stay in Walmarts and parking lots and dispersed camping, and everywhere seemed like there was danger around the next corner. But realistically, as you do this more, you start to realize that if you take the proper steps to make sure you're in a good location, generally you're gonna be okay. And don't let the fear of traveling keep you from doing it.
Van lifing, RVing, camping out of your cars has never been more popular than it is right now. And a lot of businesses, places have all become familiar with van lifers in one way or the other. So yeah, it's not as scary as it seems.
Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions about how we stay safe or our process of finding a campsite, what we do when we get there, leave them in the comments below and we'll be happy to answer them. But until then, we'll see you in the next one.
I'm living my best life. I wake up with the sunrise. It does not look a thing like I thought that it would, but I've been getting my steps in, and I sleep with my best friend. It's the best that it has been in a long time. I'm living my best life.